While the first half of Death Note focused on Light versus L, both L's and Nier were exactly the same. Light and L were both cold, calculating, meticulous, and detached from any emotions instead of leading by logic. They were both matched in intelligence and tried to get into the other's head. If I do this, will he think this or that? If I do this, he will react like that. How can I use that to my advantage? When L died, Mello, real name Mihail Kale, was the perfect new antagonist. Since L and Light were exactly the same, if it was L who received the Death Note and Light had to catch him, very little would actually change. Mello was the exact polar opposite of the other three players. He was hot-headed, impulsive, homicidal, and very emotional. He may not have been as smart as everyone else, but he was still intelligent enough to be a worthy opponent. Besides, what he lacked in intelligence, he made up for in initiative. This would have given Light a new challenge. Instead of dealing with a sophisticated, law-abiding detective, Light would have had to deal with someone manic and extremely dangerous, a total wild card you could not predict. Light and Nier were contemptuous and just sitting back and observing events, while Mello engaged in action, breaking both legal and moral lines to further his goal. Unfortunately, when he was introduced, Nier was with him. I will say both their introductions were a textbook example on how to correctly debut a character. The immediate first thing we see of them is their reactions to L's death. Mello was devastated and almost inconsolable, while Nier stayed emotionless, basically calling L a loser for not winning the game, much to Mello's disgust, of course. Mello was dressed in all black while Nier was dressed in all white to further show how these two are different. I liked it at first how this would turn into a three-way battle. Light would have had to deal with L's heirs, while M and N were competing with each other to catch Light first. Therefore, Mello was less interesting in that regard. All he cared about was to prove that he could solve the case before Nier. He didn't really care about avenging L, his father figure. It was implied L was going to adopt Nier and Mello once he finished the Kira case, so that gives Mello a justifiable and believable motive. But he did not really care about taking out Light. But by the end, he realized there's more to life than the game. He actually took other people's lives and feelings into consideration by the end, to the point where his scheme that resulted in his death was vital for Nier to take down Light. Although it's unknown if Mello knew if his demise would prove Light's downfall or if he was working towards his own agenda. It's interesting to point out that Nier did not feel the same way. He was totally willing to work with Mello, and even with all that said, Mello was not a cold-blooded person. He felt sorry when some people died, and still respected Nier enough to trade useful information with him. It's worth noting that Mello worked the hardest to become the smartest in the orphanage, but due to Nier's natural intelligence, there's no way he could compete with someone who is naturally gifted. Tell me, whose story is more interesting? Someone who is emotional and works out mysteries, or someone who is emotionless and just gets the answers handed to him? Mello alone, and realistically, deduced that there was more than one Death Note, and he managed to coerce one of the 3 Death Notes in circulation at the time from Light. I put extra emphasis on realistically because by comparison, Nier seemed to make deductions out of the blue without a logical explanation of, oh yeah, it would make sense he would think that. In the first half, whenever Light and L made a deduction, we could at least understand their thought process. While if Mello did it, it was like, oh yeah, hell, I could have thought of that. But while Nier did that, what, how did you reach that conclusion, Einstein? The second half of Death Note was a bit of a chore, but when Mello was a part of the story, things actually happened. He kidnapped Light's sister, stole the second Death Note from him, another Shinigami shows up and straight up tells Mello of the fake rules, which in turn causes him to make even more scientific breakthroughs, made a deal with the aforementioned God of Death for the Shinigami eyes, used the Death Note to kill everyone at Nier's organization to severely weaken his operation, spent 4 years to take control of the Mafia to kidnap the Japanese chief of police, and Mello was directly responsible for Floriccio's death, which he later seemed to show remorse for. Without him, the show was all about the most boring parts of being a police officer, talking via voice and video chat, filing paperwork, uninteresting detective work. Nier was a boring character in general. I did like how they reversed psychology in a way, not just with Light and Mello, but also with Nier. Light and L spent a lot of time in close proximity. If Light ever were to discover L's real name, it was all gonna be over. while Light already knew Mello's real name, but he had no idea what he looked like aside from an old picture. Therefore, instead of playing detective to uncover a real name, Light had to not only meet Mello face to face, but survive any confrontation with him. Although I do agree, while interesting, this change didn't give their dynamic the same gravity as L and Light possibly becoming friends first. I swear, if it was just Mello as a new antagonist, I would argue the fanbase would have gotten way less mad about the second half. I also wish the anime had more time. I really wanted to see Mello get the Shinigami eyes, just as he did in the manga. Mello's character arc undergoes significant development throughout the series, allowing the audience to witness his growth and evolution as he grapples with his own insecurities, doubts, and emotions. Mello becomes a relatable and sympathetic character. His vulnerabilities and internal struggles humanize him, making him more than just a one-dimensional figure. Mello's interactions with other characters, particularly his complicated relationship with Matt, provide insight into his motivations and desires, allowing viewers to connect with him on a deeper level. I like him more than Zuko. The only reason I made that connection is because of the fire scar left on the left side on their faces. Mello's distinctive visual appearance and iconic fashion choices contribute to his memorable presence. He has red leather attire and fiery yellow hair. That provides a striking visual contrast with other characters. Light dresses formally all the time, while L dressed like a sloppy person. Mello was the right balance between them. And yes, I'd say he has yellow hair, not blonde. I wanted to take the time today to show support towards an underrated character in one of my favorite anime, and favorite pieces of media in general. I don't usually watch anime, but I do feel passionate towards Death Note. It's my second favorite anime ever. Well, the ones that I've seen, which is not a long list to begin with. Thank you for taking the time to hear me out. My name is Matchup Freightingale. Conquestam et fatum.